I never imagined my wedding journey would become a battlefield with my future mother-in-law, but here I am, Emma Clark, 31, a self-made interior designer, and until recently, happily engaged to the love of my life, Daniel Whitmore. It had taken me months to find the perfect gown, a romantic, vintage-inspired piece that I'd customized to honor my late grandmother, the woman who raised me. Delicate lace, hand-beaded trim, and a flowing silhouette that whispered elegance. I poured heart and memory into every stitch. When I showed Margaret, Daniel's mother, a photo, she called it charming, a word that should have been my first red flag. Our relationship had always been formal, distant, but polite. I tried my best to fit into the tightly wound Whitmore clan. Daniel had suggested storing the dress at his parents' estate outside the city. He didn't want to accidentally see it before the big day. "Mom has a huge spare closet," he'd said. "It'll be safe there." Safe. That word haunts me now. 2 months before the wedding, I decided to check on the dress, maybe even schedule an extra fitting. I called Margaret to let her know I was stopping by, but she didn't answer. When I arrived, the house felt unusually still. I made my way to the guest room, opened the closet, and froze. There were winter coats, boxes of old decor, hanging scarves, but no garment bag, no dress. I searched frantically, my hands trembling, whispering prayers that had just been moved. But it was gone. With it, the quiet excitement I'd carried for my wedding began to dissolve into dread. Daniel and I had been together for 4 years. He proposed in the snow beneath the lanterns of a Christmas market downtown. We met at an architecture gala. I was consulting on a renovation project. He was there with his family's investment group. He was raised with privileged prep schools, private jets. I came from a humble background and built my career from nothing. But we balanced each other. His order soothed my chaos. My creativity breathed life into his structure. I should have paid more attention to Margaret's early comments, the way she called my work decorative, or asked with a sly smile what my father did before retiring. How she plated my dishes during family dinners and said, "The Whitmores have refined palates, dear." Daniel always brushed it off. "That's just Mom. She's particular," and I accepted it, because I loved him and I wanted to belong. The dress was more than fabric, it was my legacy. My grandmother's gown from the 1950s had inspired mine. Hers couldn't be altered to fit me, so I worked with a designer to recreate the spirit of it. 6 months of design meetings, 3 fittings, endless nights debating bead patterns. It was a tribute, a thank you stitched in satin and memory. Standing in Margaret's guest room, the empty closet gaping at me like a cruel joke, I called her again. She finally answered, her voice suspiciously cheerful. "Emma, darling, everything all right?" I asked about the dress. Her response was slippery. "Oh, the dress, there's been a tiny change of plans. Let's talk once Daniel is back." Her casual tone chilled me to the bone. "No," I said, "I'm at your house right now. The dress isn't here. I need to know where it is." Silence. "Then, I'm just heading into a luncheon, dear. We'll speak later." She hung up. My stomach dropped. I couldn't wait for Daniel to return from his work trip in 3 days. I had to find it now. I began searching the house, her bedroom closet, the basement, the guest suite. Then I heard her voice behind the study door. She was on the phone. "Yes, Isabel, the bodice needed a lot of taking in. Emma's rather flat-chested compared to you." My heart stopped. Isabel was Daniel's sister. She was altering my dress. Without thinking, I pushed the door open. Margaret looked up, startled, still holding the phone. "I'll call you back," she muttered. "Emma, I thought you'd left." What followed was surreal. First came the lies, "It's being cleaned, it's in storage." Then the excuses. Isabel fell in love with it. She needs something for her engagement party. Then came the truth. "Frankly, Isabel will wear it better. She has the Whitmore figure, the Whitmore presence." My voice shook. "That dress was made for me, for my grandmother. It's mine." Margaret waved a hand. "We'll get you another, something more appropriate for your background. Isabel is family. You're still earning your place." I wanted to scream, but Daniel was on a plane, and in that moment, I never felt more alone. I clutched my bag and left, my legs numb, my face hot with tears. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. It was about power. And I was about to learn just how far Margaret Whitmore would go to remind me I didn't belong. Daniel returned 3 days later, suitcase in hand, concern etched on his face as he stepped into our apartment. What happened? You sounded devastated on the phone. I broke down as I told him everything: the missing dress, Margaret's twisted logic, her cruel comments about my body and background, and how she gave my custom gown to Isabel. I expected rage, shock, at least a promise to make it right. Instead, his words felt like ice water. Mom said something about the dress, but I thought she was exaggerating. Can't we work around this? It's just fabric, right? Just fabric. My jaw clenched. It wasn't just fabric, Daniel. It was mine. It was my grandmother's legacy. Your mother stole it and gave it away like it was hers to offer. What followed was the ugliest argument of our relationship. He stood there caught between his fiancé and his mother, more eager to keep the peace than to take a stand. She probably didn't realize how much it meant to you. And you know how she is about Isabel. I stared at him, heart shattering in slow motion. This isn't about your sister. This is about your mother erasing me again. He rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. Can't we just move on from this for me? That's when I saw it. The side of Daniel I had never truly faced, the son who'd been trained to defend his mother at all costs, even at the expense of truth. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who saw it clearly. So I called my best friend, Camille. Over emergency margaritas, I poured it all out, my voice thick with betrayal. This isn't about a dress anymore, Cam, I said, barely keeping it together. It's about respect. It's about who I become if I keep letting this happen. Camille didn't sugarcoat it. If Daniel won't set boundaries now, Emma, he never will. She was right. But Margaret wasn't done. She began rewriting the story. At a family dinner the following weekend, her version had already taken root. She's making such a fuss over a dress, I overheard Daniel's and whisper. So dramatic. So ungrateful. Margaret had cast herself as the guardian of family tradition. And me? The outsider who didn't understand their world. The final blow came in the form of a screenshot. Camille sent it to me with no words. It was from Isabel's private Instagram story. There it was, my dress being fitted to Isabel's body, pins cinching it in, lace folded where it had once flowed. The caption read, "Final fittings. Mom found the perfect gown." #Whitmore tradition. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own breath. It was done. My dream had been hijacked and rewritten, just like my place in their family. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. A quiet fury, a deep resolve. 3 weeks after discovering the betrayal, I stepped into a bridal boutique with Camille, not as a bride glowing with excitement, but as a woman determined to reclaim her dignity. We tried on dresses. None felt right, each one a pale imitation of what I'd lost. "This one looks beautiful on you," Camille offered gently. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I was about to undress when I heard a familiar voice. Laughter. I peeked through the curtain. Margaret and Isabel. I froze. They were being escorted to the lounge area mere feet from my fitting room. I ducked back behind the curtain, whispering to Camille, "We need to go. Now." But then I heard them. The walls were thin. "The Hamilton estate confirmed June 17th is open," Margaret said, brimming with satisfaction. "That's where your father proposed to me. A Whitmore should always marry there," Isabel giggled. "It's perfect, Mom. Way better than that tacky vineyard Emma wanted." Margaret's voice sharpened like glass. "The Hamilton estate is for legacy. You carry that legacy. She doesn't." I stood frozen, my reflection in the mirror a ghost. I wasn't meant to be one of them. I was a placeholder, a woman tolerated, not chosen. And then I remembered something. They hadn't booked the venue yet. They were planning to, but nothing was secured. A whisper echoed inside me, my grandmother's voice, fierce and warm. "You don't always have to be polite, sweetheart. Sometimes you fight," and that's when it clicked. This wasn't just a dress. This wasn't just a venue. This was a war for my identity. and I was done losing. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, the skyline blurred by the weight in my chest and the decision forming in my bones. I didn't want revenge. I wanted power. I wanted peace. And I wanted to stop feeling like an uninvited guest in my own story. The next morning, I made 2 calls, one to a therapist specializing in family boundaries and another to my office to request a few personal days. Dr. Kamari, my therapist, listened quietly as I poured out the tangled mess of hurt and helplessness. "You're grieving," she said gently. "Not just the dress, but the future you thought you were marrying into." She was right. The grief ran deeper than fabric. It was about betrayal, control, silencing. Before we talked about actions, she asked, "What do you want, Emma?" That question followed me home and haunted me for days. Did I want to call off the wedding? Walk away from Daniel? Despite everything, the answer was no. I still loved him. And I believed in the version of him that hadn't yet emerged, the version not standing in his mother's shadow. But I wasn't going to wait quietly anymore. If Margaret Whitmore wanted to play games, she was about to meet an opponent she underestimated. My first move was quiet. I contacted a real estate colleague who had worked with historic venues. "Looking for a client?" he asked when I brought up the Hamilton estate. "Something like that," I replied, trying to sound casual. What I found out surprised me. Hamilton wasn't booked solid for years like Margaret had implied. In fact, due to a recent cancellation, June was wide open. All it took was the right connection and a serious deposit. I spent hours researching the property, its significance to the Whitmores, the family photos taken on its grounds, the legacy they claimed it held. Then fate handed me a tool, an email from my grandmother's estate lawyer. The inheritance she'd left me, meant to be distributed in small portions over several years, was suddenly available in full due to a legal resolution. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to make a statement. That night, I stared out at the skyline again, wine in hand, considering my next move. Would booking the Hamilton estate make me just like Margaret? Or was this something else? I closed my eyes and saw Isabel in my dress, Margaret's voice echoing. "She has the Whitmore figure," and I knew this wasn't pettiness. It was reclamation. I wasn't stealing anything. I was taking back my place. The next morning, I called Hamilton Estate and scheduled a private appointment. When I arrived, I was greeted by the estate manager, Mrs. Harrington, whose crisp English accent and flawless suit added to the venue's regal air. "The Whitmore family has visited us several times," she said as she led me through the grand ballroom. "Yes," I nodded. "They're my future in-laws." Her eyes sparkled with recognition. I took a breath. "I'd like to reserve the estate for June 17th, and I'm prepared to make a deposit today to secure exclusive rights from May through July." Her eyebrows lifted, impressed by the offer. It was unusual, but money talks. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, I had it. Exclusive use of the estate for 3 months, a locked contract, absolute confidentiality, and a receipt that gave me back something I'd been missing for weeks: my agency. As I drove away, I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not guilt, not regret, power. Back at home, I redirected my energy into planning the wedding I wanted, not the one Margaret tried to script. I found a young designer I'd admired on Instagram, Valentina Cruz, who agreed to create a new gown on an accelerated timeline. "This won't be a replacement," she promised. "This will be a reinvention." Daniel, still trying to make things right, brought home pastries, suggested getaways, offered to help find a new dress, never realizing I'd already shifted into a different kind of planning. One evening, I decided to stop pretending. Over dinner, I looked him in the eyes. "Daniel, we need to talk about your mother." He looked up, startled. "This isn't just about a dress or a venue," I said. "It's about how she treats me and how you let her." I laid it all out. Every microaggression, every insult masked as advice, every moment I felt erased. "I love you, but I can't spend the rest of my life playing second to your mother's control." He was silent for a long time. Then finally, softly, he said, "I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it." he agreed to go to premarital counseling. He promised to speak with Margaret. I wanted to believe him, even as part of me waited for the other shoe to drop. 2 days later, that shoe arrived. His phone buzzed with an email while he was in the shower. I happened to glance at the screen. Subject: Hamilton Estate booking confirmation. My confirmation. The secret was now a countdown, and I knew exactly how this was going to end. Not with tears, not with surrender, but with truth. At last, the day of Margaret's engagement party for Isabel arrived with flawless Whitmore flare crystal glasses, floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car, and a seating chart that kept Daniel and me at the far end of the table. I wore a sleek black dress, not to blend in but to armor myself. I didn't smile much. Margaret tapped her glass, her voice honey-sweet as she stood to toast. "We're so blessed to celebrate Isabel and Carter's engagement," she began. "And we're thrilled to announce that we've nearly finalized the venue, Hamilton Estate, where Whitmore family traditions come to life." The table murmured with admiration. Isabel chimed in, glowing, "We're just waiting on the last bit of paperwork. Mom's connections practically guaranteed it'll be ours for June 17th. Daniel glanced at me. I didn't look up from my water glass. The silence in my chest was louder than the clinking cutlery. Throughout dinner, they spoke of imported orchids and string quartets, candelabras and color schemes, every detail meticulously imagined on land that already belonged to me. Margaret gushed about the estate's ballroom, its gardens, its deep importance to the Whitmore legacy. She spoke as though I didn't exist. After dessert, while guests filtered into the parlor, Daniel pulled me aside, his voice low. "What's going on? You've barely said a word all night, and you flinched every time someone mentioned Hamilton." I met his eyes, my voice steady. "Because it's already booked," he blinked. "What? It's already booked," I repeated. "By me." His face froze, then flushed with shock. "You did what?" he hissed, pulling me into the hallway. "You booked it? Why would you do that? Do you realize what you've done to Isabel?" His reaction stung, but I was ready. "What I've done?" I whispered. "Daniel, your mother stole my wedding dress. She insulted my background, my body, my worth, and gave what was mine to someone else. And you stood by and watched." He looked torn, like a man suddenly realizing he'd been living on a fault line. "I just wanted to defend myself for once, to not be the one who's always told to stay quiet and smile through it." He stepped back. "I need time to think," he said. This isn't the woman I thought I was marrying." He turned and left without another word. The front door shut behind him, the sound echoing through Margaret's mansion like a gavel. I stayed a moment longer, alone in the polished hallway, surrounded by oil portraits of Whitmores I'd never be part of. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I went home alone that night, half expecting Daniel to return. But the apartment stayed dark. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:04 a.m. It was Margaret. Her voice was icy and trembling with rage. "Emma, the estate manager just called me. She says Hamilton is already booked." By someone named Emma Clark, I let the silence stretch. "Yes, Margaret," I said calmly. "I booked it weeks ago." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped into something low and venomous. "Why would you do such a spiteful thing? This was Isabel's dream. This is Whitmore family history." And that's when the line opened wide for me to walk through. "Like my dress was my family history?" I said evenly. "The one you gave away because you decided someone else deserved it more." She didn't answer. I heard only breath. "Then, Daniel will never forgive you for this. He understands what loyalty means." At that moment, the front door clicked open. "Daniel." He stood in the entryway, eyes shadowed from a night without sleep. I ended the call without a word. I didn't owe Margaret another second. He set his keys on the table, rubbing his eyes. I drove around for hours, slept at Marcus's place. I needed time without noise. We stood in the quiet. Then finally, his voice broke through. "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air like something sacred. I didn't see it before. I didn't want to see it. I've spent my whole life making excuses for her. telling myself she means well. But what she did with your dress, how I responded, that wasn't okay. He stepped closer. I love you, Emma, and I want to be the kind of man who defends you, not dismisses you. I saw it then. Not just Daniel, the man I loved, but Daniel, the son finally stepping out of his mother's shadow. He told me about his night, how his best friend laid it all out for him, how Margaret had sabotaged every relationship she didn't control. I don't want to be her puppet anymore, he said. That week, everything changed. We started therapy together. We unpacked years of denial and learned how to set boundaries. Daniel confronted Margaret about the dress. She tried to minimize. He didn't let her. What you did was theft, he told her. You took something sacred to Emma. You had no right. Her face said it all: shock, denial, and finally, a reluctant acceptance that her grip was loosening. Then we made a decision, one I never expected. We would still get married at Hamilton Estate, but on our terms. A small, private ceremony with only our closest friends and my family. June 1st, 2 weeks before Isabel's planned date, Daniel stood firm. This isn't about revenge. It's about starting our life with clarity, not compromise. And just like that, the tide began to shift. For the first time, I felt like we were truly becoming a team. Not mother and son, not heir and outsider, but man and woman, ready to build something real together. Margaret tried one last maneuver. She invited me to lunch at her country club, the kind of place where every smile hides a knife. She opened with her version of an apology. Perhaps I was too hasty about the dress, she said, sipping her tea. I've ordered a few gowns for you to choose from. Designers. Very high-end. I smiled politely. Thank you, Margaret, but I've already commissioned a new dress. One that reflects who I am, she pressed on, unable to surrender the game. About Hamilton Estate. Surely we can find a compromise. Isabel's heart is set on a June wedding. I met her gaze, steady and clear. Daniel and I are getting married there on June 1st. After that, the rest of the summer is open. We'd be happy to extend the booking to Isabel as a gift from us. Her expression flickered shock, calculation, and finally, something like reluctant respect. I underestimated you, she said at last. You're more Whitmore than I gave you credit for. I leaned back, serene. No, Margaret, I'm not a Whitmore. I'm Emma Clark, and I don't need to become anyone else to be worthy. Our ceremony at Hamilton was nothing like I had originally imagined and more beautiful than I could have dreamed. 15 guests. A gown crafted just for me by Valentina Cruz, modern, powerful, graceful. Camille stood by my side, holding a bouquet threaded with lavender, my grandmother's favorite flower. My father walked me down the aisle, proud tears in his eyes, and Daniel stood waiting beneath the estate's oak tree, his vows full of devotion, clarity, and growth. Even Margaret attended, silent, restrained, observing the new dynamic with wary eyes. Her wedding gift to us was a pair of antique candlesticks from Daniel's grandfather's estate. A small token, but an acknowledgement nonetheless. After the honeymoon, we officially transferred the rest of the estate dates to Isabel, contractually listed as a gift from us, not Margaret. It was symbolic, a line in ink that marked a new boundary. Rebecca Isabel accepted it with a surprising softness. Thank you, she said simply, and for the first time, there was no rivalry in her voice, just honesty. Later, she admitted something I never expected. I didn't even want your dress. Mom convinced me it would make the party special. I didn't know how much it meant to you until afterward. I nodded. We've both been used to play roles we didn't choose. A year has passed. Now, I sit on our apartment balcony, the sunset casting gold over the city, my hand resting on a gently growing belly. Daniel and I are expecting our first child, and everything feels different, stronger, simpler. We still go to counseling once a month. We still check in, adjust, refine how we love. Daniel has blossomed in ways I never imagined, his spine straight, his voice sure, no longer seeking Margaret's approval like oxygen. She trained me to please her at any cost, he said one night. I didn't even realize how deep it went. We've already talked about boundaries with the baby, firm ones. Our child will never be compared, never used as leverage. Every grandparent follows our rules or they don't get access, he told Margaret. She didn't argue. Maybe she finally understood we weren't bluffing. I started something small, a support group for women dealing with difficult in-laws. It began with a co-worker's tearful confession, and now every second Tuesday, we meet at a quiet cafe. You helped me stand up for myself, one woman told me recently. I didn't think I could without losing everything, but I didn't lose anything. I gained peace. I kept a piece of my original dress, a swatch of lace the seamstress had saved before it was altered. It sits in a frame beside my bed, not as a reminder of what was stolen, but of what I reclaimed. My voice, my self-respect, my power. The biggest lesson? Real love cannot exist where truth is silenced. Daniel and I had to tear down the illusion to build something honest. We faced the pain. We named the patterns. We chose each other, not the performance. If you've ever felt like you're disappearing inside someone else's story, know this. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not selfish for demanding space. You are enough. And sometimes the most loving thing you can say is, "This is not acceptable to me," not because you want to destroy someone else's comfort, but because you finally decided to protect your own.